I always thought my family was ordinary, maybe a little distant, maybe a little quiet, but never dark. Never haunted. That all changed the day I knocked a hole in the wall of my childhood home and found something my mom had hidden there. Something that shattered every story I'd been told about who we were, and who I really was. What I found behind that wall didn't just change my life, it tore it apart. I always thought my father was a quiet man because he didn't have much to say. Turns out, he was quiet because he had too much to hide. The discovery came on a Tuesday evening, after I moved back into the family house post-divorce, thinking some fresh air and isolation in our sleepy New Hampshire town might clear my head. The house creaked like an old ship and carried the scent of pine and stale coffee. My father had passed away the year before, and everything inside had stayed eerily untouched since the funeral. His slippers still sat by the fireplace. His mugworld's okayest dad still had a coffee stain at the bottom. I wasn't there to reminisce. I came to sell the place. But then, during one restless night, I heard something strange, almost like a thump overhead. It was probably the old beams shifting or maybe a raccoon, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up to the attic. Dust blanketed everything, and boxes stood like tombstones of the past. I nudged one with my boot, revealing the word 1976 scribbled on top. As I turned to leave, the beam beneath my foot groaned and gave slightly. I froze. The floorboard was loose. At first, I thought nothing of it, just old wood warping, but then I noticed it had been lifted before. There were scrape marks along the edge. My heart kicked up. I dropped to my knees and pried it up. Inside was a manila envelope. A single letter. Yellowed. Fragile. Addressed to a name I didn't recognize: Henry James Alder. My father's handwriting. But it wasn't his name. I stood there, staring at it, my skin prickling. Something wasn't right. I opened the envelope, hands trembling. Inside was a letter dated June 1977. I scanned the first few lines, and my stomach turned. Henry, if you're reading this, it means I failed to keep the secret buried. The boy is not yours. And what I did, it was never meant to be discovered. That's when the floor creaked behind me. I froze. That sound, the creaking floorboard behind me, wasn't my imagination. I slowly turned, flashlight trembling in my grip, the letter crinkling in my other hand. But there was no one in the attic. Just shadows and dust. I waited, listening. Nothing. Just the house settling, I told myself. Just nerves. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted the moment I read those words. I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and took it with me down to the kitchen, locking the attic behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The phrase "the boy is not yours" played on a loop in my head. Who was Henry James Alder, and why was my father writing him with such regret? And worse, who was the boy? Could it have been me? The next morning, I called my Aunt Elise, my father's only living sibling. She answered on the third ring, voice cautious, like she'd been expecting bad news for years. "Elise," I said. "Did Dad ever go by another name?" Silence. "Elise." She sighed. "Where are you?" "At the house." "You found it, didn't you?" I stopped breathing for a second. "Found what?" She paused. "Your father wasn't born Robert Kingsley," she finally said. "That name was chosen after the war." "What was his name?" "Henry James Alder." I dropped the phone. The room spun. The name on the letter wasn't someone else. It was my father. He'd written the letter to himself. I picked the phone back up. "Elise, what the hell is going on? You need to leave that house," she said, voice trembling now. "If you found the letter, then others might come looking for it too. He wasn't just hiding a child. He was hiding who he was. And they never stopped watching him." "Who?" But she hung up. I stood there, gripping the counter, trying to steady my thoughts. What the hell had my father done, and why would someone be watching us decades later? The next clue came that night. It was nearly midnight when headlights flashed across the living room window. A black SUV parked across the street. No one got out. I watched from the second floor, heart thumping. After 10 minutes, it pulled away. I barely slept. In the morning, I called a friend of mine in Boston who used to work Homeland Security. I asked him to run the name Henry James Alder. He called me back within the hour. "Where the hell did you get that name?" he said. "What did you find?" "A file that's been sealed since the 70s. Connected to a covert operation called Winter Echo. Most of it's blacked out. But one thing stood out there's a flagged note that says, 'Subject presumed terminated. Any reactivation risks exposure of Project Concord.'" "What the hell is Project Concord?" He was quiet. "If your father was involved in this, you're sitting on something way above my clearance." I hung up and stared at the letter again. "The boy is not yours." Was it even referring to me or someone else? That's when I remembered, my father always had a locked trunk in the basement. I never had the key. He said it was his war box. I grabbed a crowbar and headed down. It was rusted shut, but after a few minutes of work, the lock gave way. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Some of him in uniform, others in black ops gear. Maps with red markings. A dossier labeled Concord Candidate 7. There was a picture of a boy. It wasn't me. It was another child. Curly hair. Maybe 10 years old. The back of the photo said, "Asset confirmed. Relocated New Mexico facility. No contact authorized." My pulse spiked. Was my father involved in kidnapping children? No. Not involved. He was the one trying to hide them. There was also a second letter. Dated 1983. They found the facility. I had to burn everything. The boy is gone. If anyone finds this, know that I tried to protect them. I tried to undo what we did. But you can't run forever. That's when my front door slammed shut upstairs. And I hadn't closed it. I grabbed the crowbar, heart pounding. Whoever was in the house had either been watching me, or had come for what I'd just found. I crept up the basement stairs, careful not to make a sound. The house was dark, quiet, too quiet. But I could feel it. The air had shifted again. Heavier. Denser. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stepped into the hallway. The front door was closed now. No wind. No draft. Someone had shut it. A figure moved across the living room, tall, slow, methodical. I ducked back into the shadows of the stairwell. Whoever they were, they moved like someone trained. Not a burglar. Not a neighbor. A professional. I could hear them checking drawers, moving objects with surgical precision. I backed toward the kitchen, stepped on a loose floorboard creak. The figure froze. So did I. Then I ran. I bolted out the back door, into the woods behind the house, slipping through brush and thorns until I reached the creek where my dad used to fish. I waited there, crouched in the dark, breath tight in my lungs. I didn't know how long I stayed. An hour. Maybe 2. But when I finally circled back, the house was empty again. Only this time, the trunk in the basement was gone. They'd taken everything. Everything except what I had stuffed in my jacket: one photo, the original letter, and a key I'd found taped to the inside lid of the trunk. It was small. Rusted. Labeled NM Facility. New Mexico. It clicked. The boy. The dossier. The relocation. There was a place my father had always refused to take me when I was a kid, some cabin in the desert he claimed was just a ruin now. I'd always wondered why he kept the deed. I booked a flight that night. 3 days later, I stood in front of a chain link fence in the middle of nowhere, wind whipping dust across my boots. The cabin was there, half sunken, collapsed on one side, but standing. I used the key on the rusted padlock. The floorboards creaked as I stepped inside. Nothing unusual at first. Old furniture. Empty shelves. A few family photos. Then I found the trapdoor beneath the rug. It led down into a bunker. Concrete walls. Steel shelves. And a row of filing cabinets, untouched for decades. Inside were names. Faces. All marked Concord candidates. Most had the word terminated stamped across their files. Except one. Candidate 7. The boy in the photo. There was a birth certificate, Isaac Alder. Place of birth, unknown. Then, a journal. My father's handwriting. They said he was property. But he wasn't. He laughed. He cried. He remembered things they tried to make him forget. I couldn't let them wipe him again. So I took him. I became his father. I gave him a name, a life. But I could never stop looking over my shoulder. I knew one day they'd come back. I knew they'd come for him. I staggered back, the truth sinking in like a stone in my chest. I wasn't the boy. But I had a brother. And somewhere, maybe still alive, he was being hunted. The final page of the journal had coordinates. Remote. Mountains. Just 2 words beneath them, he is waiting.